Silvano entered a dark room, the last one in the corridor. Renato followed him with his heart in his throat, moving forward and praying in silence. But let's see how things went. In the meantime, I invite you to stay in touch with our stories by subscribing to the channel. Enjoy! Renato worked as a night watchman in a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Despite the apparent simplicity of the job, which only required monitoring empty corridors and checking monitors, Renato could not find peace. He was tormented by insomnia, a constant companion since he had started this job 2 months earlier. One night at home, yet another sleepless night, he got out of bed and headed to the kitchen, wondering what to eat among the nearly empty shelves of the refrigerator. The night enveloped everything in its silent cloak, a silence so deep that it almost seemed unreal. Renato, sitting on the sofa and lost in his solitary thoughts, was about to abandon himself to torpor again when an imperceptible sound shook him. It was a subtle rustling, almost like the furtive passage of a shadow under the door of his apartment. Time seemed to stand still as Renato stared at the door, his breath caught in a pause filled with apprehension. With an uncertain step, he approached the door. He bent down, and his fingers trembled as they grasped a piece of paper that someone had slipped under the threshold. The words, written in a shaky hand, seemed to dance before his eyes. "Help me, please. My little sister is dead, and I'm scared." Renato felt a shiver run down his spine. The solitude of the night was now more oppressive, and the ticking of the clock in the distance seemed to mark the rhythm of his growing fear. Who could have left that message? Was it the handwriting of a child? With his mind assailed by 1,000 questions and his heart oppressed by anguish, Renato found himself having to make a decision. The night did not promise anything good, yet something inside him, a primal and powerful impulse, pushed him to act. He had to find out the truth behind those trembling words, hoping there was still someone to save. Renato's heart was pounding, almost as if it wanted to burst through his chest as he headed toward the family's apartment across the street. There were 2 children living in that house. Perhaps that was where that desperate help came from. Arriving at the door, he hesitated. Fear of what he might find on the other side gripped him, but the responsibility of a possible rescue gave him the strength to carry on. He knocked firmly. The sharp sound interrupted the silent murmur of the night. Silvano, the child of the house, appeared in the opening, his chalk-white face marked by recent tears that had left luminous trails on his cheeks. "Thank you for coming, sir," she murmured in a faint voice, the words almost muffled by sobs. Renato followed Silvano down a narrow, dark corridor that seemed to lead deeper and deeper into the heart of a nightmare. They finally arrived in a small room, the last one at the end of the corridor. There was a bed there, and on it, a small, motionless figure. Renato approached with a hesitant step, his breath held in silent prayer. He gently touched a little girl's arm. It was cold, but beneath his shaking hand, he could feel the faint pulse of a pulse, almost imperceptible. She was alive, but she needed help. The reality of the situation hit him with devastating force. It was a race against time. With a new urgency in his heart, Renato grabbed his phone and dialed the emergency number. As he waited for help to arrive, he looked at Silvano, whose face now showed a glimmer of hope. Shortly after, help arrived and promptly saved the little girl and took little Silvano with them. In the days that followed, the echoes of that night of terror seemed to still reverberate within the walls of Renato's apartment. The intervention had been timely, the children had been saved, and their father, found in a state of drunkenness, had to face the consequences of his actions. But the real test for Renato was just at the beginning. After having managed the emergency, you have to deal with the scars that the event had left. Have you ever faced a situation that, although resolved, left deep marks on your life? How did you deal with the aftermath? If you like the story, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support. One morning, someone knocked on Renato's door. He opened it, and in front of him he found Linda, the mother of the children he had saved, who was smiling at him shyly. In her hands, trembling from the cold or perhaps from emotion, she held a chocolate cake, generously sprinkled with icing sugar. "I wanted to thank you personally," she said, in an emotional and sincere voice. Renato invited her in, noticing the children behind her who were watching him with curious and grateful eyes. Linda told Renato about her decision to leave her husband. "I thought my children were worse off without their father, but now I realize that is not the case at all," Linda confided. "It was a choice full of pain and hope, a step towards an uncertain but necessary future." Renato listened, his heart heavy with the responsibility he felt he carried. Little Mia, her eyes filled with a new light, approached him and with a firm and clear voice said, "When I grow up, I'll marry you." It was an innocent promise, a symbol of trust and affection that made the two adults burst into laughter. After Linda and the children left, Renato sat for a long time, looking at the closed door. He had dreamed for months of a quiet night and of rest without interruptions. Now, as silence filled the room again, he realized that, despite the fatigue and weight of the past few weeks, he felt a sense of peace. And as dusk fell gently, Renato realized that maybe, just maybe, it was finally time to dream of a peaceful future. Have you ever found yourself faced with a choice that could change someone's life? And how did you act?